Hi again. And today's book on knife fighting and training is about one very, very specific part. And it's this book, Contemporary Knife Targeting, Modern Science versus W.E. Fairbairn's Timetable of Death by Christopher Grosz and Michael D. Janich. So in All in Fighting, W. Fairbairn printed a diagram showing major blood vessels and with this timetable of death. And what it was is if those blood vessels were cut, the time it would take for either unconsciousness or death to occur. And Fairbairn got this information from the Shanghai police surgeon. Now, this book is an attempt to refute that timetable of death and make a more modern scientific estimate of how long unconsciousness or death would occur if those blood vessels were cut. So that's the core of this book. There is other stuff in the book, but that's the core of it. The problem is the original timetable of death, as published by Fairbairn, is rather irrelevant. I don't really know anybody who ever really took it as gospel or took it as particularly relevant, because what does that knowledge achieve in the realities of a violent confrontation? So with that in mind, this book is rather irrelevant, even if they do come up with a more precise and a better scientifically approved timetable. That timetable is of very limited relevance. And by the way, even the best guess science in this book is a guess, really, because there's so many variables. This is analogous to the study of stopping power in handgun ballistics. Stopping power, which we've referred to before, is something of an illusion, but it's a commonly understood term. The necessity to stop a violent attacker and to turn off his attack is the goal of armed combat. So by shooting, or in this case by stabbing. So the certain amount of anatomical knowledge is obviously relevant, but it's a little bit like those charts you used to get in the martial arts books of all the vital points of the body. It's not something that's readily achievable on a highly animated, violent aggressor. So stopping power has a couple of main components. The person, I'll refer to handgun ballistics for a moment. The person may stop voluntarily. And this can be a psychological stop. In other words, you produce the firearm and he suddenly realizes he's on the losing side and he stops and he gives up the fight. There's no, the impending attack. That's a psychological stop. He may also give up voluntarily because he realizes he's been damaged, he's bleeding, he's not going to win the fight, and he gives up. He's rendered submissive. Then you have an involuntary stop, where the guy is trying to fight on, he's doing his best, he's completely determined, but physiologically he can't continue. He just can't. Everything goes black, or he goes weak, he collapses, and try as he might, he can't continue. And it's very hard to quantify a voluntary stop because we don't know if it's going to happen. He himself wouldn't know. He's attacking you for some reason, and then he gives up. That's a problematic area to explore. But the involuntary stop really is the interesting one. So it's the study of causing sufficient damage that the guy can't continue the fight, try as he might. And whether it's with a pistol or whether it's with a knife, that's the goal of the self-protection aspect of this. So yeah, we're not talking about assassination, we're not talking about sensory removal or anything like that, where this kind of information on timetables and arteries may be of some relevance. But for the self-protection, and that's what this book is aimed at, from some of the material, it's not really that relevant. Targeting with a knife, I always say when I talk about this subject, with a knife, there are good targets and there are better targets. So there is nowhere on the body that is invulnerable to a knife attack, from the top of the head to the soles of the feet. If you have a sharp knife and you cut or stab, it's going to cause some amount of damage. Now, whether it will be enough to cause that involuntary stop, we don't know. But in a fight, we're not always going to achieve the ideal. So just because a primary target's not available, it doesn't mean you're not going to do some damage, because it might contribute to that voluntary stop. So let's postulate an example. You've been blindsided, you've gone down, the guy's jumped on top of you, and he's banging your head into the concrete, and you're starting to feel a bit woozy as a result. You manage to access your knife, whether it's a folder, whether it's a fixed blade, carried discreetly, and you're going to start trying to cause him to stop. You're going to start stabbing him, okay? Now, at that moment, the timetable of death is not going to be foremost in your mind. You're just going to go for targets. You're going to hit what you can, what's available, and hope to get a result. It's a very complex subject. A chap who trained with us in South Africa, Anthony, he was a high-level martial artist, and he was coming out of the gym one night, and he had his pistol in what they call a moon bag, what we call a fag bag, fast action gun bag, or a fanny pack. But he had it looped around his shoulder, and he's heading to his car, and he was packed by 3 guys, attacked him. And he created some space, he accessed his folding knife, he had a spider coat, and he went to work. And after a bit, he said to them, guys, I'm cutting you, you're bleeding, you're in a knife fight. And they realised that it wasn't punches they were being hit with, they were being cut, and they ran off. So quite often guys don't even know they're in a knife fight. Nothing registers. Sometimes a knife cut can be intensely painful. We've all cut ourselves and it really hurts. And sometimes the guy doesn't realise it. We don't know what drugs they're on, etc. So there's all those considerations. The other thing is blood vessels. Going back to the timetable of death, blood vessels are not the only target. You've got ligaments, you've got nerves, you've got muscles, and you've got the organs. And this book does discuss that they're not the only targets. But as I keep saying, you've got to go with what's available. What is the target that's available? It may be the large muscle of the thigh. You're stabbing into them. They may be moving him with the knife or whatever. Frontal targets, side targets. He may be hunched over, and you've got the top of his head. it's places you wouldn't normally want to target, you may have to. Can you cause him to stop his actions by gradually damaging enough of his structure that he can't continue? And it's an unknown, it's a double-ended unknown situation. So there's quite a bit of material in the book, but a lot of it's nothing to do with the title, Contemporary Knife Targeting. There's some examples of defense with a knife and so on, which is all good. Mike Janich, he knows what he's talking about. But the central thesis of the book, I think, in my opinion anyway, it's rather irrelevant, as was Fairbairn's original diagram. Maybe of some interest in some ways, and as I refer to things like century removal, which obviously people Fairbairn was training were interested in, the commandos and so on. But for the majority of the armed citizen, I don't see the value of the book at all.